everyone. I'm Barb Platt, and I'm here today wearing the hat of the clerk of the Bulk Regulating Development Committee, not any Sandy Spring hat at the moment. And I want to introduce Brian Massey, who is, was at one point a member of this meeting, grew up in this meeting. He's our camp program manager. And for those that always ask the question, yes, he is the son of Frank and Beth Massey. Thanks with us too. On the screen, we have John Nassiger, who is zooming in from Charlottesville. Thank you, John. John
Good afternoon.
On the special campaign committee, and he'll be part of our program today. So I'm glad we're recording this since we're a small faithful group. I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're going to do. First, to get ourselves really pumped up, we're going to watch the new camp video about Opequon, which is very cool. Then I'm going to ask Brian to say a few words about what camp was like this summer and the move and what happened and kind of how it went. Then after that, we'll hear from John, who will talk specifically about the special campaign, which is the fundraising campaign, and what we've accomplished and where we're going and what the needs are. There'll be plenty of time for questions and answers. And let's go ahead and get started with the video. Actually, go back 1 second. Back to everybody. Before we share. So for John's benefit, since we're small, we can each just say our name. So he'll feel like he knows who we are. And we'll start with Jim.
Jim Webner.
Rich Liverstitch.
Frank Massey.
Patty Nesbitt. I'm Barb Platt.
Betsy Rapp.
Joanne Cowie.
Kendra Biddick.
Mark Roush.
Brian Massey.
Michael DeHart, former director of Opequon Quaker.
Holden Gosling.
I said.
Not as many gray hairs. No, it's up to hill. We moved it down the hill. But it's up the hill.
Young people deserve a space where they can get to know the best parts of who they are. It's like our organic brilliance, and I think that this camp calls to that.
What if we had like a heart that was glowing through it?
What if the heart is a flashlight?
Camp is definitely a place to step outside your comfort zone. I definitely feel like I'm able to open up more at camp and be myself more. It's just like a family and everyone's welcome.
My daughter's, this will be her 3rd summer. The magic is all about connection. Connection to community, to nature, and to finding yourselves.
You can be whoever you are and we'll accept you and love you for that. And I think being in a space where I get to be completely myself and not worry about getting judged just makes it so easy to connect with other people because everybody's being authentic.
My kids are playing. They're happy, they're smiling, they're silly. Oh my goodness, so silly. And they're bonding with other people, and they're living in an intentional community that supports this creativity and the growth that comes out of it.
I really love the freedom here, feeling as if there's kind of no limits. My daughter feels more confident as an artist and as a young teenager now.
You're not just at Opequon, you're in Opequon. You get to be in the nature, you get to be in your artwork.
Stand tall and
I get to have a home in this place. It's almost a reminder, like when the world seems like it's falling apart, it's like there are still good people that can create a community like this, and that's pretty dope.
To me, the most precious thing about camp, the people, and the culture of we're gonna take care of you, we're gonna push you to take healthy, creative risks, and we're gonna demonstrate and incubate what healthy relationships look like. All of those things make space for people to actually display their organic brilliance, which I think is what Opequon is all about.
The spirit of Opequon is in the people. It's in the games we play, the songs they sing. And that spirit has all come with us to this new property. The minute you drive up, you are amazed at the beauty and the vastness of it. The possibilities are pretty much endless at this point.
I imagine having a performance space, amplifying the things that are already here, like the garden space, the art space.
We're out in nature, you're away from technology, away from the creature comforts you might have at home. We need a basis from which to do that work of letting people grow, thrive, and flourish in an environment that is thriving and flourishing.
We are in a bigger space, it's more expansive. It almost feels like this is BYM saying yes to the future.
Sun has come out beyond the shadow of my doubt. I am walking on this earth stronger than ever. Walking down this hill stronger than ever.
We can watch it again at the end. Brian, when you start, I was gonna say, before we got into that, the snapshot of why we moved, but I didn't do that. So if you could just start with where we were and why we needed to move, which is a really key part of the story, and then tell us how it's going and how this summer was.
Thank you all for coming to talk about, think about, listen about the camps in Opequon specifically. The one thing I love about that video is that it really captures the spirit of all of BYM camps, but specifically of Opequon. I grew up in these camps. I went to and worked at Shiloh and Teen Adventure. I didn't have a lot of, I knew people who worked at and went to Opequon. I didn't personally have a lot of connection to the camp until stepping into this job 4 years ago. And I just fell head over heels in love with the camp. And the incredibly unique spirit that what has been built there over the last 25 years. It's again, not to compare, all the camps are great, but there's just something magical about that place and about the way in which the directors and staff and counselors and campers and work rangers and families make a space for kids to be goofy and silly and creative and joyous, and as Jared says in the video, like display their organic brilliance, which I think really is a great way of summing up kind of what happens so often at Opequon. So in some ways, the reason why I started by saying that, because the reason why it was necessary to move was because that camp and that spirit deserves a long-term forever home that is like worthy of that spirit, of holding that spirit. The property where Opequon was for its first like 20 some odd years that BYM had camps there before as well, before Shiloh. It's a wonderful property with a lot of beautiful things about it, a ton of memories, but it wasn't property we owned, so it was kind of hard to know how to make the right long-term investments, which you kind of need to make. And then also had some limitations in terms of its space being somewhat constrained, and also its kind of location and its ability to connect to nature and wilderness, which is essential to our program. And so it had been clear for friends who care about Opequon and care about the camp for a while, they're like, oh, that's probably not the right long-term home, the right forever home. So what is? And in a moment of real kind of way opening, I would say, which I sometimes feel like I, as a border-based Quaker, sometimes overuse that term, maybe other people do. Sometimes it really is true that way opens in this really wonderful way. This kind of connection with the Rolling Ridge Conservancy and kind of emerged in late 2021. They just felt like the perfect long-term, hopefully forever home for Opequon. I can talk about kind of why that felt like a incredible natural fit. One of those was has Quaker roots. Many people within our communities had known about it and been connected to it for many, many years since the Conservancy was created in the 70s, I believe, 70s or 80s. Can't remember. Friends Wilderness Center is there as a very specific and tangible Quaker connection. And then it also had a summer camp there that closed, which is, the last year that they ran camp was 2018. And for many different reasons, decided to stop running. So all of a sudden, there was quite literally an opening in this beautiful 1,600 acre property, 250 acres of which is the kind of camp property. That's very close to the former Opequon site, so close that Opequon campers and counselors had taken trips there for many years, and hiked around and stayed on the property, so there was already a connection, and the possibility to have a long-term, you know, forever home for the program, to really give it that stability, that it can, then we can invest in collectively, and it can take root and grow. And so all of that is kind of the why it felt really both necessary, but also right in this very kind of true sense to me and to several other people who kind of were part of that process of discerning the move.
I add one thing,
Yes.
which is, because I think it's something that's spoken to a lot of us, is Opequon is our most diverse camp in terms of campers and staff of color and LGBTQ, et cetera, campers and staff. And it was very clear there had been incidents in the old location in that community of harassment and unpleasantness and people feeling unsafe. And so part of the motivation also was, oh, we had this amazing opportunity. Oh, wouldn't that be a better place for our campers and staff?
Yeah, and the challenges of the previous location, one of them was that it was hard to get to nature, like that was off-site. And oftentimes that involved, like, you know, the campers and the staff taking on the road for a little bit to get somewhere else. We were trying to evolve away from that practice anyway, but it still would happen some, and there were some unfortunate kind of incidents of racism and harassment that our campers and staff experienced. One of the many incredible things about the current site is it's on 1,600 acres. This last summer, and I can talk about how this past summer went, but this last summer, almost all of the trips, the wilderness trips, which are still a core part of Opequon's program, even though it has a more of an emphasis on arts and art workshops and creative expression, we still want our campers to experience overnight trips, to experience nature and beautiful wilderness. And they could just walk down the path from the cabins and be in this protected wilderness space. And without any sense of, while being safe, I guess is one, and both actually being safe, but then also just that mental and emotional burden of worrying about interactions that might be unsafe. It was campers and staff were able to be free in wild spaces, which was an incredible luxury. And it's something we're so excited to continue to explore that property. It connects to the Appalachian Trail, so you can hike and hike out that way. It's just this unbelievable ability to be in nature while also being protected and safe. Should I?
You want to say a little bit more
about
about
this
how
one?
you were involved in the move
Yes.
and some of what that was like, and I think John will probably talk more about some of the work that had to be done, but just what that was like and what the campers experienced in the new place.
Yeah.
We'd like to hear some of that.
Yeah, so again, one of the reasons why this was a great option for us as an organization to do is that there was a summer camp property there. There was a dining hall, there were some bathroom facilities, there was a lodge, there were cabins. So there was a really great base to start from. There was still a lot of work to be done. Some of those cabins needed to be fixed, some needed to be completely replaced. Some were in better condition than others.
Some like 100%.
Yeah, fixed. And there were like improvements and maintenance and investments that needed to be made, but it was starting from a baseline that was like, imagine just buying a piece of land and how much work would need to be done with that. And so there was a base from which we could build. We can talk about the campaign obviously, but a lot of what the campaign is about kind of giving us the ability to make those investments, to make those improvements, to kind of build the physical infrastructure, as Jared would always say, the material reality that meets campers and staff needs, that makes it safe, and then allows them to do the great work that the staff to do the great work they do, and the campers to have those transformational magical experiences. Year one was camp. It was beautiful. It was, you know, so many campers and families and staff talked about this feeling of expansiveness. For any of you who have experience in the old Opequon site, again, I love it. It's incredible. It's on like a hilltop, and there's a floodplain down below, but sometimes it feels like really small. And there's actually some beauty to that. But all of a sudden to be in this big space, a lot of campers and staff talked about the ability to breathe in a different way and to kind of imagine the possibilities in a different way was very exciting. And the staff in particular poured so much of their mind, heart, and body into the summer to build those new routines, run those new activities, figure out what Opequon looks like here. And I would say, kind of like every summer at every camp, there are caveats, nothing is perfect, but it was incredibly successful. The vast majority of campers had an incredible experience, and got to connect and build those connections, with each other, with staff as well. The amount of work that went into getting camp ready to host campers was incredible. We probably collectively underestimated it, and it was a challenge. And there is a lot of work still to be done, but we were able to get it to a point where we could host. And again, we started to view year one as, oh, this is the foundation that we then build off of. So there's still plenty of building to do, both literal building and figurative building. But we have that foundation that the BYM staff, David Hunter, Sherry Woolley, all of us kind of did to get us there. And then the Opequon staff did that first year to run a successful summer. So we're very excited about year two, and then year three, and year five, and, you know, and that feeling of that feeling of long-term investment is kind of permeating right now.
Wonderful, thank you. One of the things before we turn to John to tell us more about the needs in the campaign is that the new site, it's for our summer camp, but it's also got year-round winterized potential. There's a lodge, there's some you know, winterized places where meetings or small groups could have retreats. So it's more for the yearly meeting actually than just the camps, which is pretty exciting, I think. So,
now, how long is the lease?
So the lease is, it's a 40-year lease. And it's structured in a way that I find really interesting. I'm sure Rich could say more about it too if he wants. But we're involved in those negotiations, but it's a ground lease, which is effectively kind of, as long as we use it in the purpose that we say we're going to use it for, we have almost quasi ownership rights over that property, except whenever we are done using it in that way, we give it back. So like, we don't have, aren't able to sell it, can't decide to run an amusement park. But for as long as we want to run a summer camp, it is kind of effectively ours, in collaboration with the Conservancy and the other department.
And of note, BYM now has board members as part of the Conservancy board. So it is not just a rental relationship, but we do have some governance.
And that is why they wanted us, because they wanted us to help with that governance piece.
And it's an investment in the relationship from our part as well.
So for those that got here, oh, go ahead, Mark.
What goes along with that is we and the two other Quaker organizations, the three of us, make up 9 of the 12 board members. There are another 3 that are, at large. But we have a responsibility to help maintain not only our 200, I think it's 232, 237 acres, but all 1,600 acres, which means and I spent the first year after negotiating the lease on the board, and then I stepped down from BYM trustees and another trustee stepped on. So there's a trustee, and then there are people with connections to the camping program and camp property committees who are on there. So what we're doing is saying, well, this is our area. but we were also helping with the other costs, road maintenance and
Right.
timbering and what have you.
It's a cooperative relationship.
Yep.
And it was very carefully thought through.
And we do have outs, but not immediate and not anytime we choose to. There are penalties, but we do have, we are able to step aside at various points in the lease if we say this just isn't working. But whatever we've invested, we leave.
So I want to introduce, for those that got here a little bit late, John Nassiter on the screen from Charlottesville Friends Meeting, zooming in from a couple hours away. John is on the special campaign committee for the fundraising for the camp, and he's going to tell us, and I think has a presentation that hopefully the share screen will work, and tell us some about the fundraising campaign, and then again, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So, hope it works, John.
Yeah, good afternoon. So you've got somebody sharing the PowerPoint, right? Or do I need to find it quick? And
You're sharing the PowerPoint.
I am?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the PowerPoint.
All right, then talk among yourselves for about 30 seconds and let me, sorry.
Yes.
Can I share a story from the old Opequon?
Yes.
That the video really highlights this for me. When Pat Custer was working in New Mexico, Cuba, New Mexico with the Navajo. We were bringing kids from the Navajo. And there was one kid that came every year, and Elaine Brigham would just get in tears when she would tell the story. He would get out of his car that brought him there, put down his bag, go to the art pavilion, put on his skirt, put on his earrings, moving into that, and he felt very comfortable doing that there more than he did at home. And for me, that's for me what camp is really about.
I hope I know the answer to this, but I'm hoping that this is on high ground. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Above the.
Yeah, the topography of the whole conservancy is actually, it's quite interesting, quite beautiful. It's on a ridge. The property touches the Shenandoah a little bit and touches the barrier of the Appalachian Trail what's on the top of the ridge. So it's the entire side of a mountain, which is kind of incredible. Opequon's specific property is kind of higher up. Is probably the highest up elevation wise, I'm pretty sure of the specific properties on there. And so protected in many ways, but then, also connected to the whole.
And while we're ready, John, just holler when you're ready. Brian referenced the original property. It was purchased by Henry and Mary Cushing Niles, who were members of Stony Run Meeting in Baltimore. And when I first went to work for Stony Run in 1986, they were still alive. They were living in Broadway. And they built that property. And I don't know, Jonathan, you want to know, I don't know when Friends Wilderness Center started. And I think over time, the Conservancy has expanded to more than what the Niles had first bought. But it does go back that long in terms of place of connection.
Sheila was there for probably 22 years.
Sheila Bach.
Yeah, she was the director. She wasn't the first director, but she was like within a year or two after they created the wilderness. Yeah.
And John, you've been on the board of the Wilderness Center.
Yeah, I think that's right. It was very far-sighted couple from Stony Run. You can Google, and there's all kinds of interesting things about them. And, Henry Niles was on Nixon's hit list for the time of the Vietnam War, and they did a lot of amazing things. And I think the Wilderness Center actually started in the mid-70s when they just invited people out to stay and to build that old tree house, which has been built and rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt. The Niles actually lived in that little cabin for 4, 5, 6 months of the year, for the warm months out of the year before they went back to Baltimore and heating and so forth. So they were very engaged. They set up that little stone fire circle, if that's the right word, down near the river. That was something they created. And they were really kind of an amazing couple to learn more about. And devised this ingenious organizational structure as well to create this conservancy with 3 constituent parts doing different things, but collaborating. So I think it's really great to see that kind of spirit continue.
I can add to this too, that the Niles bought it from a Mennonite community of some sort. And Betty Hoover's family was involved in that, in the building of it. So the last yearly interim meeting that she clerked, where we decided BYM would move up there, that was one of the things she said that summer before she died, that was one of the most important things she'd done in her life.
Wow.
To help the early meeting make that decision.
Correct. And it
So-
wasn't just because of her family, but she could, right, yeah, right. Okay.
So I think we're, John, thank you.
Can folks see the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, I won't try to make it full screen because I'm afraid I will mess something else up. We'll just leave it like this, but, and thank you all it's great to be with you. Thank you all for that background, and Brian particularly. I think half of my presentation at least is done, but it's great to be with you. My connection and background, as Barb said, I'm part of the special committee, special campaign, which I volunteered for because of my connection and my family's connection to Opequon. And some of this has been said, but we actually, so I have 3 boys, 3 young men now, who we actually only live about an hour from Shiloh. But my oldest son went to Opequon first because it was the 1-week option that worked for our family at that point. And I hadn't quite registered it, but since then, I think this is year 23 of our family's connection to Opequon. So it really was from the first couple of years that we had this, and which has been, so my sons now are 32, 27, and 23, and one of them, other than 2020 with the pandemic, has been at Opequon for that past 22 or 23 years. They all attended. They all worked there as young adults, as counselors, at least 2 years. My wife and I did scholarship work and cooked many summers, and were part of the community that way. And my youngest now actually was still at, wanted to work one more summer and was part of the transition to Rolling Ridge to see Opequon get there. And just, and I've said, so I did a presentation, or several of us did to Charlottesville too, and struck me, and I said, I really, they all, I think, still would say that Opequon, both that Opequon and the camping program is really the most important thing that they've done, or at least by their early 20s were saying that. A couple of them are married now, so maybe they shouldn't be saying it anymore, and it had, and they all are very clear. Brian, and the video talked about incubating community, but the camps and Opequon specifically really incubate Quakerism too. All my boys still have a connection, still identify themselves as Quakers in different ways, and they did not primarily learn that being growing up as part of a meeting. They really learned that at the camps, of what community means and what Quakerism means. So, and yes, so now more than ever, I think you've gotten this background, the move to Rolling Ridge. I will say, a couple of things were mentioned. I think it is worth stressing even more in terms of the both emotional and physical safety issue of getting to a different property, and specifically the one that we have. There were, there are physical issues at the camp in terms of potential of being one drive across a creek being cut off, but beyond that, son was with a group of campers that had an incident with the police. I mean, there really were issues in the community with the camp, both I think racially and related to gender identity, and those kids being in a rural Virginia community that was not very welcoming. And my first time up at Rolling Ridge, there was an evening potluck with 12 or 14 of the neighbors that came and were so enthusiastic and excited about the camp coming. So that it really was I think the right move. And you know, to reemphasize that again in 2023, it was basically, you know, recognized that doing this move in 9 months was pretty unrealistic and going to be a huge challenge. But because of the issues, particularly the safety issues at the camp, that it needed to happen. And kudos to camp staff for making that happen in that year.
Before you go on,
Sure.
I can't quite read the text.
Say that
If
again.
I'm the only one, then just go ahead, but I suspect I'm not the only one.
John, could you zoom in a little bit on the,
Or just read it.
Just read it, or somebody.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, if you zoom in
down the bottom?
down the bottom on that little extra bar, there's
Okay,
a magnifying
yep.
glass. Yeah, that is you go.
Good, going.
Thank you.
One click more maybe,
Nice.
One click more, right?
Yeah, we're still not there.
All right, let's read it out loud. Importance and value of Opequon. An innovative, distinct, and in-demand program using art as a vehicle for connection to authentic selves. Long history of leading BYM camps in recruiting staff of color and cultivating young camp leadership of color. Most campers and staff who identify as LGBTQ. The most sought after camp for stride campers and families, and that's one of our diversity programs. With a forever home worthy of its program, Opequon will have the stability necessary to grow and thrive over the long term.
And I'll just chime in. It was mentioned. Would have been March of last year, March of 23, when interim meeting made the decision to go ahead with this. And I have to say, that meeting was held in Charlottesville, and I was able to attend. And I've never been part of anything like that, of a business meeting that was so clear and full of joy and excitement of, you know, the level of support, which I think, as we talk about the campaign, has shown in the support that this move has gotten. And I do, you know, I think it is worth saying that the new site opens up year-round possibilities for BYM, having a year-round lodge available on this property. And I think we'll open up programming and learning possibilities for all of the camps. I think that having this new resource is not going to just benefit the kids at Opequon, but all of the camps. So we talked about moving, that the lease was ending, and I was part of the BYM Development Committee, I don't know, 10 years ago now, when some of this conversation was starting to happen, knowing that the lease was going to come up in 10 or 12 years. And even at that point, the properties we were looking at, I think, were all well over $1 million to purchase before any renovations and things happened. So, you know, this as a gift to the camping program and to BYM, really, it's hard to overstate that. So it was talked about a little bit, but give you a sense. So the Rolling Ridge is right down here in the tip of West Virginia, and as was mentioned, is between the Appalachian Trail and the Shenandoah River. On 1,600 acres, and you know, well within travel distance of all the parts of the yearly meeting. So, and again, and some of this was mentioned, but what we've got, you know, the three partners there at Rolling Ridge now are Friends Wilderness Center and the Study Retreat Associates and now Opequon. The camp, this PowerPoint started last year as we are moving to Opequon, and now we have moved to Opequon. So if any of it feels like it's cut and paste a little bit, but we were there. My wife and I ended up going up to cook for a weekend on short notice when some help was needed, and I would just echo what Brian said, that it, you know, it really felt like camp. It really felt like the culture, and there's still a lot of work to be done, but that move was successful in terms of taking the program and the culture there for the kids. I think all of this has already been covered as well. You know, I guess I would just add that there's been mention of the opportunity for camp to grow, the opportunity for other uses by BYM, but I think, you know, a 40-year thinking of this as even just a 40-year vision of what, you know, my son, who was part of this transition, all the other young adults, all the kids there at the camp, they are going to love this place. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when they're thinking about what's next for them as Quakers, what's next for the yearly meeting, what's next for, you know, for the world, I think Rolling Ridge is going to be part of what they think about. And I think going to be amazing to see what's happening there in 20 years.
Don, can you stay on that slide for 1 minute?
Sure.
Because I want to say something, and as facilitator, I'll take the prerogative to jump in. The third point, the Religious Society of Friends is strengthened. As I'm at the age where I care a hell of a lot about the future of Quakers, more than I did when I was 20 or 25. And what many of us know, but not everyone knows, is the Baltimore Area Limited Camps are known all over the East Coast of the United States among non-Quakers as the place to go to camp. And so what's the future of Quakerism and what are we going to be, to have this opportunity, a new opportunity to strengthen our camping program. Sarah Lilly will talk about this is the future of Quakerism right here. So I just want to emphasize that piece of it, because that's not why we went there. We went there to have a better camp property for our kids. But it's much bigger than that, as John has said, and that's the point I want to emphasize. Okay, moving along.
All right.
Thank you.
So Brian mentioned a little bit just a sense of the facilities. There is a lot that has been fixed up. There's a lot still to be done that is happening now and will be done by next summer. And then an item or two that I think will particularly related to figuring out a pool or a pond for the facility. There was a big slip and slide happening on one grassy slope last year, but I don't think that's a long-term solution to kids needing to cool off. But it is, there is a core of facilities, and I think, as was mentioned, I was at Opequon long enough to know that, and it made sense, but the facilities really were kind of barely hanging on because it didn't make sense to invest in that property knowing that we were not going to be there. And so, things like warm water and working toilets and that, it was always a challenge to get through the summer. So it's exciting to know that this can be really be set up for the long term. I think, yeah, the questions?
I was gonna say, unless this PowerPoint has changed, I'm pretty sure most of these pictures are from 2021 or 2022. So before we moved there. So that's kind of the status of the facilities before we moved there. And then I know at least in the fall update, you'll see these are all pictures or most of these are pictures that were taken. So they're increasingly, if you want to see what it looked like this summer, there are ways to see that. But this is what it looked like before we moved there.
The list up there.
That's what existed before. Like that was the baseline, yeah.
So.
And yeah, when I was there this summer, the kitchen was not nearly that clean either, but that was mid camp.
So, just to clarify my understanding, the lodge, the dining hall, and the shower house, those are winterized?
I don't think the shower house is, the lodge and the dining hall are, and they're
They have
bathroom,
bathrooms.
they're bathroom shower facilities in the lodge, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the lodge also really allowed, some of the support staff, or certainly support staff that needed access to electricity, or it just gave different options than existed at the old site for both volunteers and for staff. So this will give you a little bit a sense of kind of where we're, and some of this is behind my Zoom, so I can't see it, but the first camp happened. We completed the driveway. There were repairs to the dining hall, platform tents. One of the things that was figured out is that particularly the cabin process, permitting was much slower than anticipated. So that is ongoing, but was not all finished for the first summer. And then in progress again for, I think more importantly, coming up for this year, that finishing the cabins, the new cabins, composting toilets, and wrapping up. We'll talk a little more about the special fundraising campaign. And then not yet started, as I mentioned, pool or pond, looking very much at the art building. I think was a garage, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong.
Multi-purpose facility.
But there's a lot that could be done there. In addition to which, I think there is recognition now that there were some very specific things that using the facility this summer, particularly from the staff that were there, that are being recommended, additional sink, not large things, but additional sinks and different, there's work to be done. And also then the campaign looking at realizing that it was, laying all this over top of existing positions with the camping program of folks who were already very busy was, anyway, that there is serious consideration, and I think the need for a part-time project manager to finish up some of this work so that camp folks can focus more on camp. So I don't know that the road is obviously a winter picture, and I don't see gravel on it, and I know there's gravel now, and I don't know when. I'm guessing this cabin picture is from the spring, kind of to the old PowerPoint, but so I don't, and some of you may kind of have information or know some of the status of the special campaign. So this was, the move was approved March of last year. Annual session, there was kind of formal approval to start as a campaign committee. I believe we didn't meet till December, although there were some gifts already made or pledged by then. But we came into this thinking this is a huge amount of money, which it is, and looking at a 3-year campaign to get it done. And to see what's on my next slide, but we are, so our initial goal and current goal of $735,000, we are, as of this week, at $708,000 given and pledged to the campaign, which is just astonishing. And that, there is actually the funding letter going out to camp families has just gone out or going out in the next week or so, to another 5,000 folks. So there's still a lot of people that we are wanting to reach out to let participate and be a part of this amazing campaign. But we are close, and I think when we start, I don't think any of us had any idea the kind of response that we would get. It's just been has been really amazing. So we are closing in on it. I think we are we are certainly hoping to be there much sooner than in a 3-year window now. So where it stands, I mentioned those amounts. The actuals for what was spent this year are still being sorted out some. So we're hoping that those numbers are in the door in a month, basically by the middle of December. There and kind of what happened with contingency funds, what happened over and under costs. I don't think we're expecting anything dramatically off budget. Brian can probably speak better to that. But then we also are, I think with those in hand, staff are going to be also looking at, as I mentioned, the part-time project manager position and what the most accurate estimates would be for at this point for the pond and for other pieces that still need to be done. Is that, I don't know, Barb, before we go on from there, Barb or Brian, is there anything that I got sideways or that you would want to add?
I think what I would emphasize, because I've really been wrapping my mind around this in the last week, I don't sit on the special campaign, but I'm in close touch with it. And one of the things at the bottom of the screen is we've identified many new needs that may lead us to increase the goal. And this is, for those that were around a few years ago, Sarah said, please emphasize, this is not like the Catawba bathhouse that was under budgeted probably from day one and didn't have as participatory and, for lack of a better word, effective fundraising that this campaign has had. So it's not like, oh my God, we're gonna be $500,000 short, nothing like that. But things come up every week. The example Sarah had last week was, the permitting department said, you need a trench over here now for something, and that's gonna cost $2,000. Well, a number of little things that weren't known at first, along with staff coming back and saying, we really could use a new sink here and a little bit better basketball court. So a lot of things you don't really know till you get into it. And I think that the fact that we've come as far as we have says a whole lot about how accurate the budgeting was, but it's still something, it's in flux a little bit. And the other piece of that that's really important is there's many people and many meetings in our yearly meeting that have yet to contribute to this campaign that want to contribute to this campaign at whatever level they're capable of doing. And so the special campaign committee is aware that the philanthropic potential to meet a higher goal is very clearly there. So it's not a concern of, uh-oh. It's much more, hey, we still have opportunity to do a little more, to raise a little more, and especially in the next several months, to finish the work so that camp is even better this coming summer. And hiring a project manager would be very much a contracted hourly kind of position, according to Sarah. Brian, you can say where we're not, yearly meetings, not hiring more staff. But for those that know Sarah Galuli and David Hunter, David lived down at camp, our camp property manager, for months, weeks, whatever. And it was too much. It was like too much for us to have taken that all on without some help. So at this stage, getting the extra help of somebody who can stay on the permit people and, deal with all that project management stuff day in and day out will really help.
Yeah, and we do. I mean, I apologize for the lack of clarity. That really is a function of the timing of this presentation. It's not the state of the campaign or the budgeting. It's the timing of this presentation that we know that the numbers are going to be changing some when we get this updated. Again, not expecting that to be particularly dramatic, but also not wanting to get ahead of staff and what not wanting to make guesses for numbers when we should be able to have solid ones. We should be able to have solid ones very soon. So,
John does. I don't have anything to
When you touched on this a little bit, I just wondered if you had a notion of the extent to which meetings have been making donations as distinct from individuals.
I certainly it has been just in terms of the process and decision making, it has been much more individuals to date. I know that there are, and Barbara Willie would be better. I don't know if you know this, Barb. I mean, there's some I've just taken in where we are making a request to Charlottesville Friends, which has not made a corporate gift yet, but our budget process is just starting to happen. And when we started the campaign a year ago, kind of laying this out, we didn't expect to be where we're at right now. We really were thinking about it as a multi-year campaign. So some of that is happening. I know there is one meeting that has made a very, very generous pledge already. That's part of it. There may be another meeting or two that have made pledges. I'm not sure exactly where that stands.
Part of it is the meetings are just really, I think, this fall and moving to the winter, having presentations like this.
Right.
They just didn't happen the first year, because the focus was really on the silent phase of our capacity donors.
I think Stony Run gave 100,000.
Yeah, Stony Run. Back here, there were questions about mine.
I had a question, and I was wondering whether or not the 735 number included the pond or pool or water feature.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Go
yes.
ahead. I mean, my understanding is yes, it does. It is, it is the larger item that I think folks do want to take another look at that and see if 18 months later that estimated cost feels like it's still it's still accurate.
Yes, I was gonna say, I would have to look back at the detailed kind of budget documents to speak with 100% certainty, but my understanding is that, yes, it was factored in the 2026. But it was like a 2024 expected expenditures, 2025, 2026. That was all projections made in 2023,
Right.
but it was
there.
factored in.
I believe it's in the budget. I want to say it's in at $70,000 of this total amount, something like that. But again, I think folks are wanting to look and feel like that. I mean, I may have a better sense of exactly what is needed, what is wanted now, and better able to budget what that.
At the very least, we were thinking about it.
Yeah, it was on the budget.
Yeah.
But it's not like it has not been in the budget.
Accurate.
Oh, no, I was just thinking that we have, Elise is an Opequon camper.
Yay.
And Loretta and Sebastian Harrington are other Opequon campers on the cover. We love it, except for not having to ask permission to go back to your cabin at this time. Or not camp.
They're a lot farther away than they used to be.
Yeah. One other thing, this is a little different tangent, but back to the value that I have always really appreciated and think is so important is that it is, a couple parts of it. My wife calls camp Quaker Finishing School for the staff, for young adults to go back and work, and whether or not that's a good phrase, she's from Virginia, so that's what came to her mind. But anyway, but it is a real opportunity that doesn't exist anywhere else, as far as I know, for younger children to spend meaningful time and build meaningful relationships with young adults. And that is such a critical piece of growth and development of identity and learning community. And, so that element of camp of having, both having young adults take such levels of responsibility for camp and for communicating, kind of trying to build community and Quaker values, but also to be building those kind of relationships with kids it's very different than what they have with their parents or what they have with other much older adults, as you can see from these pictures.
Rich wanted to get in.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about what I know about the ponds. The entire, with basically the Appalachian Trail Commission has been provided an environmental easement over all of the 1,600 or 1,500 acres Except for the 3 areas that other organizations, including us, lease. We have no, BYM has no ability on what used to be the flock property to put a pond. But the Appalachian Trail Commission said, oh, well, you could just put a swimming pool in there, which we'd have to fence around it, and it would be a single use kind of thing. The retreat center has the ability to put in 2 ponds, and part of the lease negotiations was they'll work with us on one of those. They'd like to have access to it when we're not using it. But the use of one of those, if it's on their site, and the 100 acres that was recently purchased to finish out the contiguous kind of nature of the property, has a different kind of West Virginia environmental medium, which does allow for ponds as long as wildlife can get to it. So we've got some options in terms of where, and depending on the hydrology, what is it that makes sense? There are streams that run through. And that is part of what a pond feasibility study should be for. But it seems like that is a far better option than going with a swimming pool that we're gonna have to close off to everything, including the wildlife.
So, yeah, I have questions for John or Brian or any of us. Go ahead.
I'm horrified that the question came up about this meeting making a public. Because this is gonna be probably what, the 5th year in a row that we have not met our budget? And we cannot continue to do that. We're already, the budget shows a slight increase to Sandy Spring Fun School, not what we like. Please, don't try to put this in our 2020.
So
No
I-
intention of putting it in the 2025.
So I don't think any contribution would be from our operating budget. I think what we're gonna be exploring is as we decide what to do with the money requested and our reserves. Do we want to make that a distribution
Right.
from those?
That's my understanding too.
Are there other questions? I really appreciate John coming in. I want to make sure that we don't keep him longer than intended. But before we get into our own nitty gritty about Sandy Spring, which we may want to do.
I'd like to say something about Opequon at Rolling Ridge. I see it as a stability for the camp, obviously. But I also see that there's an incredible benefit for adults. At our adults as our finishing school too. One of the things that I recognize is that the camps serve the campers, the staff, and all of the adults who help out there. And I remember it was one of the best weeks of my year. And it's like, when I think about it, there's probably as many adults, parents, whatever, or whether they're parents or aunts, uncles, working in the kitchens and in the maintenance programs, that was probably as many as we had staff members, which adds, another almost third. So that's almost like we were serving 1,000 people throughout the summer with the campers and the staff and the support staff. And we seem to forget the benefit that we get from our camps. And we get a morsel of what is going on with the camp programs by being immersed in that staff. And that's like bonus for all of us, because we don't have a immersion program in Quakerism for us, other than, where can we create it, you go to Pendle Hill for several days, this is a whole lot cheaper and easier. The other thing is that I went up to Rolling Ridge a couple weeks ago, to be able to see what kind of progress we've made. And I walked into that lodge and I realized that, it's something, you know, that's always been there. This is a place for adults to have for our own retreats year round if we want to. So this place is not just for kids. We yearly meeting folks have the opportunity to make it into a retreat space for ourselves too. I mean, we're not all gonna be on those bunk beds, that's for sure. And we need to do something about the toilet seats, because not all of us can get down that low. We need grab bars in the toilets, but there are ways to making that lodge more age appropriate for the bulk of us who are active in our yearly meeting, who are older than 50. And so that's one of the first places we, as a yearly meeting, has that could potentially serve the older population. And I would love to see that as another reason we want to support Opequon Quaker. Because we could make it more participatory for a wider bit of our BYM population.
So I wasn't thinking we'd be here more than about an hour because it's first day and it's always been here since 9 a.m. I want to thank John for zooming in with that great presentation and sharing your story. I want, if you didn't see it on the table over here, or if you haven't received them, our newsletters and also the basic campaign brochure. It'll tell you what some of the links are and how you can donate. John, do you want to have any last word here? And then I think we'll.
No, just thank.
Fine, but.
Well, thank you to everybody for coming to learn and listen, and honestly, clearly, for all of your involvement in the camping programs and the work that's been going on. And so, yeah, you know, we are just we're moving this forward. I don't, you know, I have not been part of whether it's sort of specifically what Sandy Springs talked about in terms of goal or ideas, and we're certainly not asking people to do something that's a hardship, but we do want everybody to have the opportunity to be part of this if you're able. So, but thank you all very much. It's great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Hopefully see you up at Rolling Ridge sometime.
And John wrote a lovely little piece that's on the back of the fall update, kind of talking about the connection to campus.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Anybody that wants to stay in Yak, I can stay in Yak for a while, but we can certainly shut down our text. And thank you, Jim and Coleman, for help on that end of this program. If you want to hear about environmental issues and all the forestry work going on at Opequon, Patty knows a lot about that. It's very interesting and exciting. Some about that Brian conference too. Anybody needs to go, you can go. Release, be released.
Thanks for watching our video. For more content from Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, click to subscribe.